A room, no windows, the air thick with smoke, and the weight of something none of these men wanted to admit out loud. German intelligence officers sat around a table, photographs spread before them. Intercepted radio signals, reconnaissance reports, satellite imagery of troop movements. But they weren't watching Eisenhower. They weren't watching Montgomery. They weren't watching Allied supply lines or invasion routes. They were watching one man, George S. Patton. For months, Airman High Command had devoted more intelligence resources to a single American general than to any other Allied commander. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the most senior German commander in all of Western Europe, kept Patton's file on his desk at all times. Any whisper, any signal, any shadow of Patton's movements, it was classified as highest priority intelligence. But why? Why would the most powerful military machine in history dedicate so much focus to one man? Because that one man terrified them. It started in November 1942, Operation Torch. The Allied invasion of North Africa. Patton commanded 35,000 American troops landing on the coast of Morocco, America's very first major ground operation against Axis forces. German commanders watched closely, the way they always did. They studied enemy generals. They looked for patterns, weaknesses, tendencies they could crush. What they found made them uneasy. Patton moved fast. Faster than any American general was supposed to move. The U.S. Army was known for slow, methodical advances, overwhelming firepower first, then movement. Patton didn't follow that script. Within 3 days, Casablanca was secured. The French surrendered. His troops covered ground at a pace that German observers hadn't seen coming. Not even close. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, commanding German forces across the entire Mediterranean theater, made one urgent request for detailed intelligence on this unknown American general. Who was he? How did he think? What made him different? The reports that came back were deeply unsettling. Patton had spent his entire career studying German military tactics, not from translated summaries. He read German military theory in the original language. He had walked the actual battlefields of World War I, the same ground where German armies had nearly broken through France. He understood German operational thinking better than most German officers did. An American general who thought like a German commander. That realization settled over the intelligence room like a cold draft. They didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning, because the next time Patton appeared on their radar, it wouldn't be a minor operation on the coast of Africa. It would be a disaster, and it would be theirs. February 1943, Tunisia. German forces under Rommel launched an offensive at Kasserine Pass. The attack was brutal, precise, and devastating. It smashed straight through American lines. U.S. troops, inexperienced, unprepared, fled in panic. Vehicles abandoned, equipment left behind, soldiers running. It was the worst defeat American forces would suffer in the entire war. German commanders watched what happened next with quiet confidence. They had seen this before. A nation shaken, an army broken. They expected retreat. They expected hesitation. They expected the Americans to lose their nerve. So they waited. And then, something changed. Early March, George Patton took command of the 2nd Corps, the same shattered unit, the same soldiers who had fled Kasserine in terror. German intelligence officers monitoring the front didn't understand what they were seeing at first. Within 2 weeks, those same soldiers were attacking. Discipline returned. Morale didn't just recover, it ignited. Units that had been classified as combat ineffective were suddenly pushing forward with an aggression German reconnaissance teams hadn't seen from American forces before. Patrols were probing German lines with a ferocity that felt different. Something had shifted. And it had shifted fast. Rommel himself noticed, in his diary. He wrote that American forces had suddenly become far more dangerous, too rapid, too complete. Reinforcements couldn't explain it. New equipment couldn't explain it. Someone new was in command, and that someone was rewriting the rules. July 1943, Sicily. The Allied invasion plan was clear. Montgomery's British 8th Army would take the lead, driving up the eastern coast toward Messina. Patton's 7th Army, a supporting role, a flank guard. Patton had other ideas. He drove his forces across the western half of Sicily at a speed that shocked everyone, including his own commanders. His troops covered more ground, in less time, than any Allied force had managed in the entire war. German units trying to evacuate across the Strait of Messina found themselves in a race they never saw coming. They expected days to withdraw. Patton gave them hours. The evacuation turned chaotic. German commanders desperately scrambled to get their men out before Patton cut them off entirely. And when it was over, Patton reached Messina first, before Montgomery, despite starting further away, 200 miles, 39 days. German after-action reports describe the campaign with a rare mixture of professional admiration and genuine alarm. One officer wrote something that would echo through German military circles for months afterward. Patton fought like a panzer commander, not like an American infantry general. He took risks American doctrine didn't allow. He fought like a German does before defenders could even react. That was exactly what scared them. But Patton's war wasn't over, and neither was his danger to them. August 1943, Sicily, the height of Patton's success. And then everything almost fell apart. Patton visited 2 evacuation hospitals. He encountered soldiers suffering from combat fatigue, men broken by the psychological weight of war. In Patton's mind, they were cowards, men who had abandoned their comrades when it mattered most. He slapped one soldier across the face. A week later, another hospital. Another soldier. This time, Patton pulled his pistol and threatened to shoot the man. The story reached Eisenhower. It leaked to the press. Within days, the most successful Allied general in the theater was facing calls for his removal. Congressmen demanded he be sent home in disgrace. Newspapers ran editorials unfit for command. German intelligence monitored the scandal with intense interest. They had spent months identifying Patton as the single most dangerous Allied commander on Earth. And now, the Americans might remove him themselves. German officers could barely believe their fortune. But Eisenhower didn't fire him. He reprimanded Patton severely. And then he kept him. The Germans noted that decision with quiet alarm. If the Americans were willing to endure that kind of public embarrassment to keep Patton in the war, they were saving him for something. Something enormous. By early 1944, Patton had been pulled from active combat command. He was in England, waiting. The Germans tracked his every movement with obsessive precision. He wasn't commanding any of the obvious invasion forces. Everyone knew D-Day was coming. The question was where. German intelligence reached a conclusion that seemed almost too logical to question. Patton must be commanding the main invasion force. The Americans wouldn't waste their best general on anything less. Whatever Patton was leading, that was where the real attack would strike. So the Germans built their defenses around that assumption. They positioned their strongest reserves at Calais, the shortest crossing point across the English Channel, the place where Patton would logically land. They reinforced. They waited. They prepared. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that the 1st United States Army Group didn't exist. It was a ghost. Inflatable rubber tanks sat in fields across England, invisible from the air, convincing from a distance, hollow inside. Fake headquarters buildings made of painted plywood. Radio operators transmitting signals around the clock, creating the illusion of a massive army preparing to move. The greatest deception operation in the history of warfare. And it worked out because the Germans believed one simple thing: wherever Patton was, that's where the main attack would come. June 6, 1944, Allied forces landed at Normandy, 150 miles from where the Germans had built their strongest line. German commanders hesitated. Was this the real invasion, or a feint? Was Patton about to strike at Calais with the main force? For 6 critical weeks, German armored divisions sat frozen near Calais, waiting for an attack that would never come. And on the beaches of Normandy, the Allies held on. Because of one man, the Germans couldn't stop watching. August 1st, 1944. Patton finally received his combat command again, the Third Army. And the Germans had been waiting for this moment. They knew he was coming. They had watched him, studied him, feared him for 2.5 years. In the first 2 weeks of August, the Third Army covered more ground than any Allied force had managed into full months of brutal fighting. Patton's divisions raced through Brittany, then swung east toward Paris with a speed that left German command structures in western France completely unraveled. Units lost contact with their headquarters. Orders contradicted each other. Commanders didn't know where the front was because Patton kept moving it. Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge, who had replaced Rundstedt, sent increasingly desperate reports back to Berlin. The Third Army was everywhere. Every defensive line the Germans tried to build, Patton was already past it. The situation was out of control. By mid-August, Patton saw something, an opportunity that could end the war in France in a single stroke. German armies were retreating through a narrow gap near the town of Falaise. Allied forces could close that gap. Hundreds of thousands of German soldiers would be trapped. Patton pushed north. Canadian and Polish forces pushed south. The pocket tightened. Inside, German units began to panic. Soldiers abandoned their vehicles. Officers lost control of their men. The destruction was catastrophic. Over 50,000 Germans captured. Nearly 10,000 killed. The German army in France lost most of its tanks, its artillery, its transport. German officers who survived Falaise later said it was worse than Stalingrad. At Stalingrad, they had time to prepare. Patton gave them no time at all. December 1944. Germany launched its last desperate offensive, a massive attack through the Ardennes forest that caught the entire Allied command off guard. The 101st Airborne was surrounded at Bastogne. The situation was on the edge of catastrophe. Eisenhower called an emergency meeting. He asked his commanders, how fast can you counterattack? Most generals said weeks. Patton said 48 hours. The room went silent. It was impossible. You couldn't pivot an entire army 90 degrees and strike on a completely new axis in 2 days. The logistics alone would take weeks. But Patton had already planned for this. His intelligence officer had predicted the German attack when everyone else dismissed it. Contingency plans were already in place. One phone call, and within hours, minus 250,000 men, tens of thousands of vehicles, moving through freezing winter conditions across icy roads. And 48 hours, Bastogne was relieved on December 26. After the war, Allied intelligence officers interrogated captured German generals. They asked a simple question: which Allied commanders did you fear? The answer was always the same. Montgomery was predictable. Bradley was cautious. But Patton was unpredictable. Aggressive, dangerous. The only Allied commander who fought the way the deserts of North Africa to the frozen forests of the Ardennes, George Patton earned that fear. One battle at a time, one impossible victory at a time. Until the generals who had conquered Europe learned what it felt like to face a commander who thought exactly like them, only better.